in the 6 years that I've been here at St. Stephen's and the 10 or so years in which I was preaching at St. Martin's, you will have heard that probably about half to 2/3 of all my sermons are about the love of God. Does that sound right? You hear that over and over and over again. When I was young, before I became a Christian, I went to an evangelical church. And our Bishop Frank used to stand up every Sunday and say, people are always asking me, why do I say you must be born again? Every Sunday you say the same thing over and over again, you must be born again. Why do you just keep going on with that? He says, because you must be born again. So I keep preaching about the love of God because the love of God is central to who God is, central to his relationship with you and me, central to the way in which he engages with the world. And we see this not just in the life of Jesus, because that's really where we see it the most, sort of dramatically and profoundly and deeply expressed, but we also see it after Jesus' resurrection and indeed also after his ascension. And that's what I want us to focus on today. John chapter 21, the last chapter of John's gospel. John being the disciple that Jesus loved. John felt that he was the best beloved. He was the favorite disciple. He probably was. He also lived the longest, died the oldest of all of them. And in this last chapter of John's gospel, we have this final story about Jesus' appearance to the disciples. And later on, just a couple of words about what happens after that. And I want us just to listen to the way that Jesus speaks and behaves and see how much he loves you. How much he loves you. So the story starts, and if Bishop Allen were here, he would be like totally, I'm like really with this. The disciples have just come out of the experience of Jesus dying on the cross and then seeing him risen in the upper room twice, the first time and then the second time with Thomas. And they wake up one morning and he decides, I'm going to go fishing. Because, of course, that's what one does, you know, when the Son of God has just died and been raised to life, you go fishing. It seems so funny. It's so down to earth, isn't it? It's just really ordinary. Yeah, I'm going fishing. And then they say, yeah, we're also going to go fish. So we go fish. It's like, it's real Cape Town. Just like that's what we do. We go fishing. So off they go. They're just living this very ordinary life. And yesterday, those of you who are friends with me on Facebook, or if you're not, you can just go look my name up. I was lying with our little cat that we've adopted, this elderly abandoned cat called Spiwe, which means given. And he was lying on my chest while I was doing my sermon preparation, but he was like right up here under my chin. So I had my Bible down there, and Spiwe was like here, and I was trying to prepare for today. It was just very ordinary and very precious and very beautiful. And as I read this passage, I thought, this is just like Spiwe lying on me. This is just like the disciples deciding, we're going to go do what makes us feel happy and calm and peaceful, to be out on the boat fishing. And then we are told in verse 5 that Jesus appears very early in the morning because they had gone out overnight to fish. I believe that's how you're supposed to fish. And he sees that they've caught nothing. Of course, he knows it already because he is God. And so he says, friends, have you caught any fish? He knows the answer, and they say, no. And that's such a beautiful way to start, isn't it? He doesn't ask, how's your faith? How's your soul? How are you feeling about the crucifixion or the resurrection? He asks, how's fishing going? He's interested in that ordinary, silly, trivial thing. How's the fishing? It's like just your mate that comes along and asks. And so they say they haven't caught any fish. And then Jesus, of course, is never one just to speak. He's also always one to act. And so he says to them, throw your nets on the other side of the boat. And then you'll find some fish there. So they do, from this side to this side. Now, those of you who've been here a while, you know, we always, this is the good side, right? And this is the bad side. We just say, like, if you want to be on the good side, just sit on the side of church. Nobody forced you to sit on this side. So there's no fish on this side, but Jesus says, cast your nets on this side, and then they get this massive haul of fish. Jesus is caring, but he also acts for the well-being of the disciples. I mean, there were only 11 of them, or 10 of them. They didn't really need 153 fish. But it reminds us, doesn't it? This is the last chapter in John's Gospel. Do you remember the second chapter in John's Gospel? The first miracle that Jesus does, according to John. Anyone remember? Later, comes later. The wedding in Cana. The water into wine. The first miracle, according to John, was the transformation of water into wine. It's the same thing, isn't it? Yes, this couple, they have their wedding. It's very ordinary and it's beautiful, special, important, of course. Gina, our wedding was very special, very important. But it's a kind of everyday human thing. And during the wedding, they run out of wine. Jesus is the Son of God. He decides, okay, my very first miracle to present myself to the world is going to be to sort out the wine problem, because of course you can't have a proper celebration without good wine. So he makes hundreds of liters of wine. I mean, it's not just a few bottles, it's hundreds of liters. More than you can ask or imagine, and the best wine as well, proper lekker wine. And now at the very last chapter, we have the same story, don't we? Except instead of wine, it's now fish. No fish, and then so much fish they can't even haul the net into the boat. This is Jesus just being really kind and generous and thoughtful and down to earth, dealing with everyday things that people are concerned about. And if that's not enough, a few verses later, verse 9, Jesus is cooking breakfast for them. He's cooking breakfast for them. Isn't that amazing? When they land, they see a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus has made a little fire, got some kind of grid, I don't know what they did in those days, and he's now making a braai, breakfast braai. This is the Son of God, died on the cross, descended to hell, rose again to new life on the third day, appears to them in the upper room by walking through walls and shows the holes in his hands and his side. That's the person, the risen Son of God, God's only Son. This is the person who's cooking breakfast for them. And nochal, he provides the fish himself. You think it's the disciples' fish, but when you read it carefully, you see it can't be. Because verse 9 says, when they landed and saw the fire, there was fish on it already. And then after it, 2 verses later, Jesus says, bring some of the fish you have caught. But he doesn't actually cook their fish, because he provided the fish for them and the bread. Isn't that, that's amazing. Isn't that amazing? Are you amazed? Yes. You should be amazed. He should have come down dressed like I am in big clothes, very fancy, and spoken great theological words and told them about heaven and stuff. But no, he comes down and he cooks food for them. I want to remind you what we read in Revelation. Revelation. This is the person cooking food for it. In a loud voice, 10,000 times 10,000 angels circling the throne of God called out, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. And every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them was saying, to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever. This is the guy who's cooking breakfast for you. Wow. What a breakfast that was. So kind and thoughtful. And then in verse 12, and honestly, I've read this passage every year, and I've never noticed verse 12 until Hilfred pointed it out to us yesterday morning in morning prayer. Jesus says to them, come and have breakfast. Come and have breakfast. What an invitation. We had the Last Supper not very long ago. Come and have a meal with me. It's my last one. And he tells them some hard stuff, and he predicts Judas' betrayal. And now, on this morning, he says, come and have breakfast with me. It reminds us of the feeding of the 5,000, which you rightly pointed out earlier on. Not the first miracle, but a really good one. He fed the 5,000 by taking bread and fish and breaking it and giving thanks to God and then distributing it to 5,000 people. We had the Last Supper in chapter 13 of John's Gospel, where Jesus does the same. He breaks bread and he shares wine and they speak together. And now this morning they have breakfast together with bread and fish on a braai. The Last Supper was at night. We remember Judas going out into the dark, into the night. And now this is the morning, before sunrise. From supper to breakfast, from night to day, from dark to light. We see the sun rise because we saw the sun rising already, the Son of God. And then we get this interchange between Jesus and Simon Peter, where Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? And specifically, do you love me more than all these other people, the other disciples? And 3 times Peter is asked this question. And 3 times he protests to say, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he's hurt. He's hurt by Jesus asking him all these questions. You see that in his last response. He's really hurt, like, don't you know that I love you? But what Peter didn't realize until perhaps afterwards was that Jesus was taking him back to the night of his betrayal, where 3 times Peter says, I do not know this man. Do we remember that? I do not know this man. I do not know him. I have never met him before. He's a complete stranger to me. 3 times he denies Jesus on that night after the Last Supper when Jesus was arrested. And here we have Jesus giving him 3 opportunities to, in a sense, reset that, right? To undo those denials by these 3 affirmations of love. This is Jesus helping Peter find forgiveness and be reconciled with his Lord. 3 times he is asked, do you love me? And in so doing, Jesus resets him. Those denials are cancelled because of these 3 affirmations. And then Jesus says to him, feed my lambs. And he says, take care of my sheep and feed my sheep. Jesus obviously is not really into sheep. He's really into people who follow him like a shepherd. And that takes us back to John 10, doesn't it? That wonderful passage where Jesus speaks about himself as the good shepherd. And he says things like, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. They know my voice, and so they follow me. And I lay down my life for my sheep. This is the great love of Jesus, expressed towards his people, expressed towards each one of you, sitting here today, watching online. Jesus is reminding each one of you that he loves you, that you are one of his sheep, that you should know his voice and that you should follow him, that he's there to take care of you, to feed you, to take care, to feed you. This is what Jesus is. He's the caretaker. He's the good shepherd. He's the one who looks after. And then lastly, in today's readings, the last 2 words, Jesus then says to Peter, follow me, follow me. Follow his example is what he's saying, right? Because Jesus is about to leave, and so they won't be able to physically follow him, but they can follow in his footsteps. They can follow the example that he has set. And we got this on Maundy Thursday when we read the passage about the washing of the disciples' feet in that room just before the Last Supper, just before the arrest, just before Judas' betrayal, where Jesus washes his disciples' feet in John 13. And then he says to the disciples, now that I, your Lord, have washed your feet, you should wash each other's feet. I have set you an example that you should follow, Jesus says to them. I have set you an example that you should follow. And that example is to love, to care, to be humble, to be small, to look out for those in your circle, to take care of them. Sure, friends, can you hear how this passage is saturated in expressions of love and care from Jesus towards his disciples in very down-to-earth, human, practical ways? He wants you to know that he really, really loves you and that he's 100% here for you, in your corner and on your side. But if you would indulge me, I want to just talk briefly about what Jesus does after his ascension, because that passage that we read there at the end of John is post-resurrection Jesus. He's died, he's risen from the dead, he's not yet gone to heaven. That comes a little later. But after he's already ascended into heaven, we have another encounter between Jesus and not one of the disciples of those days, but one of the new people who would become his disciple, and that is Saul. Acts chapter 9, the conversion of Saul. And Luke, who writes the book of Acts, says, meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. That's like beautiful poetry, isn't it? It's quite chilling. Breathing out murderous threats against Jesus' disciples. He was a very, very bad man. He was very religious. He brags about that in some of his other letters, how religious he was. Did everything that was required of a Jewish man, a righteous man. But he was so vain and arrogant, and he was cruel and violent. He went out of his way to find people who were following Jesus and to persecute them, to have them imprisoned and even killed. And while he's walking along the road, there is this blinding light around him, and he falls to the ground, and he hears a voice saying, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Not comforting words, right? Challenging words. And then Saul says, who are you, Lord? He obviously knows this is someone important. And the response is, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now, I want you to recognize that what Jesus is saying here is that he identifies with those disciples of his, those followers of Jesus, who are being persecuted by Saul. He identifies with them, so much so that he says, you are persecuting me. Of course, Saul is not actually persecuting Jesus, right? Jesus is sitting up in heaven on the right hand of God's throne. He's not actually physically persecuting Jesus like Jesus was physically persecuted when he was crucified. He is already risen and ascended. He's living in heaven. Everything is good with him. But he says, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. Why are you persecuting me? He takes it personally because he is one with his people. He aligns himself so much with those who follow him, with his disciples, which in numbers have been growing and growing and growing after Pentecost. He aligns himself so closely with them that it is as if Saul is persecuting Jesus himself. You have heard us say this, you have heard Chava say this. This is what we call God's option for the poor. God chooses to align himself with those who are marginalized, those who are suffering, those who are struggling, those whose faith is fragile, those who are unwell, those who have illnesses, those who have family problems, those who are unemployed. These are the places and the people to which Jesus is most attracted, kind of like a moth to a candle. He comes there because his love is so great. When he sees that you're struggling with life, he comes close to you because he is attracted to the struggle that you have, and he wants to come close to you, to stand alongside you. He identifies with you. When you are going through hard times, and when you may even feel that God has abandoned you, that is when he is closest to you. because he is right there with you in your suffering. And this is still true today. When we think of places in the world where there are conflicts, we can know that Jesus is standing right in the center of that conflict. He's standing there because that is where he says, why are you persecuting me? So there's some comfort in that, particularly when you're going through pieces of life that are hard and you feel like God has somehow left you, abandoned you. Is to remind yourself that it is when you feel most abandoned that he is most close, because he really cares for you, and really loves you. But then Jesus does this quite remarkable thing with Saul. He calls Saul to become his lead disciple, because Saul becomes Paul, and Paul is the one who takes the gospel to the Gentiles, outside of the small Jewish community and to the much larger Roman, Greek, and pagan communities. And despite Paul's history, despite everything, all the horrific things that Paul has done, Jesus decides, I'm going to work with this one who's the most unlovable, unlikable, murderous, violent, hateful person. This is the person I choose. You could have picked someone nice, right? You could have picked someone good, someone decent, but he picks Saul. Of all people, that's who he picks. This is God's radical love. This is the love that's beyond what we can really understand. Love that probably we cannot demonstrate or feel towards people who are so despicable and violent and revolting. It becomes very hard for us to really love them. But Jesus has this extreme capacity for love that transcends our own ability to love. We might say, Jesus, how can you do this? This is not okay. But that's the one that Jesus picks to work with. There really is nothing that we can do to block God's grace and his purpose. You might feel like you're not a good Christian. You might feel like you have no gifts and nothing to offer. You might feel like you're far away from God, and all of those things may be true. But God, if he wants to use you, you just need to tag along. Because when he wants you, he gets you. Because he loves you. And he sees the potential in you. And so in a sense, we just have to surrender to him. We just don't fight with God, because you will lose. You will lose. His love, his attentions, they are just irrepressible. Dear friends, I really want us to leave this service with this deep sense of God's care. Just the way he cares for you, the way he's interested in the little things in your life, as well as the big things in your life. That he wants to make breakfast for you. He wants to cook you breakfast on a braai. Fish and bread, simple food. That he's interested and concerned that you're fishing and you're catching nothing. And he'll guide you on how to catch the big number of fish. That he stands with you when you suffer. And when you feel most alienated, most disconnected from God, that's kind of when he's closest to you. And that he's always calling you, always inviting you to come and partner with him in his mission. He did that with Paul. He can do it with me. He can do it for you. This is what God wants to do for all of us. I invite you today just to surrender yourself to the love of God. Don't fight him. You won't win. Just surrender yourself into his care and his love. Let yourself be fed by him. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.